A newcomer to Canada faces many, many challenges. I mean, finding a place to live, place to work, worship, shop, all that, and so much to learn. Simple things, some simple things, and some really, really not simple, like learning how our financial institutions work. One element in particular in that broad realm is credit. It's not simple. It is critical to a functional life here in Canada, but can be difficult for newcomers to access. Nova Credit is a credit bureau that aims to address this challenge. Joining me now is the CEO and founder, Misha Esipov. He is in New York City. Hello there.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
What is the problem that you are trying to solve?
So, I mean, you kind of alluded to this already, but millions of people move around the world. Canada receives almost 1 million people every year. As you look at Canadian demographics, Canada is going to welcome somewhere almost 15 million people in the next 15, 20 years. And every time somebody arrives, they effectively have to start over. They don't have they have to get a place to live, a credit card, a bank account, and so much more. But they need credit history in Canada to be able to access those kinds of things. And so when you arrive in Canada, you arrive what's called credit invisible. And what Nova Credit does is we allow people to move around the world, including moving now to Canada, and bring with them any financial history they've built in their home country. So if you move to Canada from, let's say, India or the UK, you can bring your credit history from those countries into Canada. And with that, you can get approved for products at partners of ours like Scotiabank.
I had a particular and personal experience when I moved to the US many years ago, and it's like I just dropped from Mars. Nothing mattered that I had done here in Canada. And that's still an issue for people arriving in this country. Why haven't the big credit bureaus signed off on this, solved this?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of these industry problems that's been around since the very beginning of the credit reporting space. I mean, you look at the big credit bureaus; they exist around the world, but they're really regional businesses. So no single credit bureau exists in every market that matters. And so what we've done is we've sort of solved this industry problem by partnering with the big bureaus. Experian, Equifax, TransUnion, CRIF, Credit Info, various independent bureaus around the world, and brought together a global industry that has never really worked well together.
And in layman's terms, so how does your system work? Are you a translator? Do you metaphorically pick up the phone, call all the bureaus, and put it into a little set spreadsheet and then sell it off to a Canadian financial institution? How's it work?
Yeah, you can kind of think of us like the Rosetta Stone, right? So you've got credit history. Let's say you're moving to Canada from India. You connect to us and we say, hey, where are you from? You tell us you're from India. We pull your data from India. We then use our Rosetta Stone and we translate that into a Canadian format and scores and analytics, and then we can deliver that on your behalf only with your consent and approval, to a bank of your choice.
What are some of the differences across different countries that you have had to account for? Because I know even countries that have massive economies and well-educated people, they don't necessarily work the same way when it comes to even the difference between credit versus debit or cash versus plastic.
Yeah, I mean, every country has its nuances. I think the biggest difference that exists around the world is there are some markets that just don't have credit bureaus. Like France is the only G20 economy that is that way. The next big one is this concept of positive versus negative credit reporting. So positive is what we're used to here in the US and in Canada, where the good and the bad is reported. So if you do repay on time, that information is reported into the bureaus, and that helps you improve your score over time. Whereas there are some markets that, like Brazil historically, that are what's called negative reporting, where only if you've been bad does that information get added into the bureaus. And so I can go a lot deeper in this kind of thing, but there are nuances country to country that we've had to learn how to handle and normalize.
What benefit to a newcomer to Canada does engaging with Nova Credit provide? So, if they have no credit history from another country, they are going to get some sort of financial product. Maybe it's a secured card. They're going to get training wheels. So, does this speed up how quickly they can learn to ride a bike, and if so, by how much?
You got it. Exactly. I mean, the better your history, the more willing a financial institution or a bank will be to lend to you. So if you've got a lot of experience with having had a credit card or having had a mortgage before, you're going to have a good credit history in your home country, and that information can get you a type of product as if you had lived in Canada your whole life. So you can get a $15,000 or $20,000 credit card upon arrival from your very first day. You can get approved for, for an auto loan or a mortgage or a personal loan, despite being absolutely invisible to the credit system in Canada.
I was a victim of fraud here in Canada and had to work with my financial institutions, with the credit bureaus. It took, I don't know, 6 to 12 months until it was resolved and my credit score returned. I can imagine it is an order of magnitude more challenging when you're dealing with another country where either it's fraud or the data that comes through just is inaccurate in some way. What perspective would you have on that part of the dynamic for newcomers?
Yeah, so a core component of what we do is we authenticate the customer in order to pull their data. So what that means is we have a series of processes that we take a customer through to actually answer the question, are we confident that you are who you say you are? And there's different ways that we help manage that risk, but in taking a customer through that process, we are able to significantly reduce the risk of any fraud. And that's allowed us to create a system that is now being used by some of the biggest banks in the world, including HSBC, American Express, telecom providers like Verizon, and a number of other key banks and partners that we've worked with for many years.
Tell us about the credit passport specifically.
Yeah, so the Credit Passport is the flagship product of the company. We now have connectivity into about 25 different countries around the world, over 2 billion people we can find information on with their consent. And the Credit Passport really is, this global data dictionary, almost like a Rosetta Stone that allows for someone's financial identity to compliantly move around the world. So if you, Bruce, tomorrow wanted to move back to the US or move to the UK or move to Singapore, we'd be able to take your prized Canadian history and use that history to get you approved for financial products all around the world.
What is required on the part of lenders? So I know you're not everywhere in Canada yet. Maybe you will be one day, but is it that the newcomer needs to apply to a lender who happens to pull from the Nova Credit database in order to get that benefit?
Yeah, so in a future state, we believe every financial institution in Canada is going to be using the Credit Passport. I mean, the newcomer segment is just so important in Canada, and having more data results in better decisions and a better value proposition. And in doing so, they can actually help win more customers. And becoming a customer of ours, similar to what Scotiabank announced with us a few weeks ago, involves learning how to read our Rosetta Stone, learning how to read the Credit Passport, and being able to ingest that into their decisions to help make more informed and better decisions.
What are 2 or 3 things, and I'm going to ask you to generalize here because every newcomer to Canada is completely different. So I'm going to ask you to generalize. What are 2 to 3 things that they need to know that they may not know about how the credit system works here in this country?
You start over. That's the first thing, and it takes a long time to build a good credit profile in Canada. You need to get multiple credit lines. You need to spend multiple months, if not years, repaying those credit lines, and it takes a few years to build a healthy and a good credit profile. And only once you have a good profile can you start to get approved for prime products, meaning low interest rate or higher credit limit products that can actually serve you day to day. And that problem that's been around for decades is one that is faced by almost 1 million people a year. And that problem has now been solved. And that problem can be solved by allowing information to flow into Canada. And that information can help people land on their feet and accelerate their path of integrating into Canada.
If you could snap your fingers and change one thing about the environment for newcomers to Canada, what would it be?
I would allow the same way that banks, all of the banks in Canada rely on the 2 Canadian bureaus. I would accelerate the path with which they rely on the Credit Passport. We think it's an inevitability that every bank is going to want to be able to use this information, and we want to make it easier. And obviously, you've been in this space for long enough to know that It's not easy to sell to big banks. Banks love to press the big red button and reorg and adjust where people are sitting. And so it's just there's a certain inertia required to break through to be able to partner with these kinds of, some of the largest companies in Canada. And, we'd love to find ways to accelerate that.
Yeah. Well, best of luck, and I don't know, welcome to Canada.
Thank you. Well, we're coming up there as much as we can. So it's only an hour away. I'll be back in a few weeks. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here. Misha Esipov was in New York City joining us to talk about Nova Credit and their effort to ensure that people who are newcomers to Canada don't lose credit for behavior in the credit world that they may have in their home country.